They called it divine justice. They called it holy war. But what happened outside the walls of a forgotten city in the heart of the Levant was neither divine nor just. It was a slow unraveling of humanity, buried beneath banners of righteousness. And while the Black Death would later devastate Europe, there was a place, years before that plague ever reached shore, where death came quicker, crueler, and far more deliberate. This was no act of nature. It was engineered, calculated. A siege so brutal, even time itself turned its back on it. A siege that killed more than plague and then vanished from history. The year was 1188. The Crusader states, those fragile outposts of Western Christendom carved into Muslim lands, were reeling. Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt and Syria, had recaptured Jerusalem the year before, shocking Europe and sending a ripple of panic through the Holy Roman Empire and beyond. Pope Gregory VIII had called for a new crusade, but armies take time to gather. In the meantime, the Muslim forces advanced, city by city, fortress by fortress. Most chroniclers focus on Jerusalem, on Acre, on Hattin, but almost none mention Daroun, known to the locals as Daroun. It wasn't a major capital. It wasn't even well defended. A walled town near the coast, just south of Gaza. It was more important as a grain hub and a resting point for caravans. But Daroun held something else. Something that made it a target not just for conquest, but for extermination. When Saladin's scouts reported that a group of Knights Hospitaller had fortified themselves inside Daroun, he dispatched a division under the command of his nephew, Al-Muzaffar. They expected minimal resistance, but what they found instead was a town transformed into a fortress. Not just Hospitallers, but hundreds of local Christian refugees, Armenian merchants, and even defected Templars had taken shelter inside. They had food, they had weapons, and most dangerously, they had secrets. According to a suppressed Vatican letter discovered centuries later, one of the Hospitallers in Daroun was a man named Brother Theobald D. St. Omer. He had not only trained in medicine and fortifications, but was rumored to be in possession of a Byzantine scroll said to contain the lost engineering designs of ancient Roman siege defenses. Whether it was true or not, what followed shocked both the attackers and their allies. The siege of Daroun lasted 72 days. Not because of the defenders' strength, but because of what they unleashed. The first sign came on the 9th day. Muslim soldiers began to collapse, not from wounds but from within, vomiting blood, shaking violently, and dying within hours. At first, it was believed to be poisoned water. Then they found the dead animals, crows, rats, even stray cats, all lying near the same supply lines. The commanders changed camp locations, but the deaths continued. It wasn't a plague, not as we know it. It didn't spread beyond the siege lines, and only those near the front perished. Then, scouts captured a young boy who had tried to sneak out of the town. He spoke Arabic fluently and claimed to be the son of a converted Frankish family. What he revealed horrified the camp. He said the town's defenders had prepared more than food and arrows. They had created smoke pits, filled with rotting carcasses, strange powders, and molds collected from old Byzantine ruins. They would ignite them when the wind shifted toward the besiegers. The smoke was said to burn your thoughts and rot your blood. Modern scholars believe this might have been one of the earliest recorded uses of rudimentary biological warfare. Not by accident, not by contamination, but as strategy. The psychological toll was worse than the physical. Rumors spread among the Muslim troops of cursed relics, of demons awakened in the town. Morale collapsed. Commanders whipped their soldiers to keep them in line. At night, haunting music drifted from the city walls. Flutes, chanting, sometimes screams that sounded too twisted to be human. But inside Daroun, the situation was no better. Starvation had begun. The defenders were burning their own dead to avoid the same sickness they inflicted. Brother Theobald's journal, preserved in fragments, speaks of visions, of faces in the smoke, and of a pact made in desperation. On day 63, a Muslim informant from inside the city sent word. The town was fracturing. The defenders had begun fighting each other. That night, the smoke stopped. The walls went silent. Al-Muzaffar prepared the final assault. When they entered Daroun, there was no battle. No resistance, just corpses, hundreds of them, in streets, in wells tied to posts, some burned, some ripped apart. It wasn't clear how many had been killed by starvation, sickness, or each other. But one thing was certain. The defenders had turned on themselves long before the enemy came through the gates. In the center square, atop a blackened pyre, hung the body of Theobald D. St. Omer. His skin was peeled in strips, symbols carved into his chest. A message was scratched into the stone beneath him in Latin. "We open the gate. May no one close it." The city was razed. Salt poured into its wells. The survivors, what few remained, were either executed or vanished into the desert. And then history forgot. No Crusader chronicle records Daroun. No Arab historian dwells on it. It became a silence between pages. But traces remain. In 1936, a British archaeologist excavating near modern-day Deir al-Balah uncovered a foundation buried under 6 feet of ash. Among the ruins, they found blackened pottery marked with the Hospitaller cross, and a single bronze plaque inscribed with the Latin word ignis, fire. Officially, it was dismissed as a misdated Crusader outpost. Unofficially, one of the researchers later wrote in his journal, "It didn't feel like a settlement, felt like a warning." And that is the tragedy of Daroun. Not just that it happened, but that we were never meant to remember it. A siege so desperate that its defenders turned to death itself as a weapon. A place where even the victors carried sickness back with them. A silence in the history of war that killed more men than the plague, but was buried deeper than any mass grave. What else did they bury with it? Thank you for watching CIHUYS. If history leaves gaps this large, imagine what else has been erased.